Back in the summer of 2017, my girlfriend and I were driving up from Evanston, Illinois to spend the weekend at her parents' lakefront cottage in Michigan, a popular destination for summer retreats. This drive for us was around 6 hours long and involved taking the highway north through the western half of Michigan. A lot of this path goes through some fairly remote areas, and eventually we found that we'd been driving on the same single-lane highway road through some dense woods for what seemed like the last 45 minutes. I recall our navigation showing that we were somewhere in the Huron-Manistee National Forest. Also, when I say dense, I mean that the tree canopy formed almost a tunnel around the fairly narrow road, which made it seem significantly darker than it actually was outside. Luckily, summer days in Michigan are long, so we still had a couple of hours of daylight left. While driving, I noticed some older dilapidated constructions in the woods to the right. It looked like remains of an old shed or storage buildings or something. This is a good time to mention, too, that I'm a bit of a treasure hunter. I collect historical relics and old coins, and these ruins seem like a great place to dig up some artifacts that may have been buried for years. Also, this stretch of the road was deserted, so it was unlikely any others had explored this place first. Luckily, I had my metal detector with me in the car too, as I'd planned to use it at the beach. I also had one of those children's shovels made of the neon plastic and a wooden handle for digging in the sand, and although it's not ideal for soil, it would do. So I told my girlfriend that I wanted to stop for a bit and pulled over on the shoulder, and she said okay, but she would stay back and continue napping. The nearest ruins were small, but not too far from the road itself. I figured the current highway must have originally been a backwoods road that the inhabitants could have used back in the day. However, I noticed a large structure deeper in the forest and decided to check it out, as large buildings that could have been people's homes and such have a higher chance of yielding a cool find. I made my way over and could see it was made of brick. The window holes were still clearly defined too, with dirty broken glass around the edges. I looked through one and could see the building, and though half collapsed, it had a floor that looked somewhat intact. Back towards the road, my car was just barely within my range of vision now. Since it was dark around the ruins, I recall leaving my shovel outside, as I didn't need it for the hard floor, and I used my free hand to hold my phone as a flashlight to help spot anything shiny. I snooped around the corner and started sweeping with the metal detector within the building walls. The roof was collapsed for half an hour or so when I started to hear movement around me, like crunching twigs and bushes rustling. I dismissed this as small animals at first, but I kept hearing it, almost as if it was following my movements around the building from the bushes on its perimeter. At this point, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I got the feeling that I was being watched, like some animal was stalking me or something. And so I decided to turn back, and I started hollering and making loud noises in hopes of scaring off whatever could be there, and cautiously made my way back over to where I'd left my shovel. And when I got there, it was gone. And I'm certain I couldn't have misplaced it, because it was neon orange, and I had left it in the middle of a pretty open area, so there was no way I would have just not seen it. At this point, I was spooked enough to just say fuck it, and I booked it back to my car. Hopping back in the driver's seat, I could see my girlfriend was awake and her eyes were wide. She told me that just a few minutes ago, while I was gone, she saw a child emerge from the forest and just look at her from several feet down the edge of the road. She described it as a boy, maybe 7 or 8, with a dirty face and ragged clothes. She told me that she was worried the boy was lost or left behind or something, but the way he looked at her made her feel just uneasy. Said that he didn't look afraid or curious, but just looked at her with a gaze that seemed off for a lost child. She told me that she still wanted to notify police, but wasn't comfortable leaving the car or calling out to the kid, who by now had just disappeared. I hadn't yet told her about my experience by the ruins, but at this point, my heart was beating, and I just felt very uneasy about this whole thing. As I looked up the non-emergency number for the nearest sheriff's office on my phone, my girlfriend screamed my name, and I looked up and there was a boy similar to the one that she described just looking directly at us from the edge of the woods, a few feet from the passenger door. I was alarmed to see another, similar boy right outside the back window, peering into the back seat. At this point, I just didn't care anymore. I just turned the car on and accelerated the fuck out of there. After a few seconds of driving, I looked in my rearview mirror and the boys disappeared into the forest as fast as they had come. I sped over the limit for God knows how long until we were just clear out of those woods. We ended up calling the sheriff's office too, who mentioned that there had been similar sightings of the children along that road by other drivers. Though I never got a good look, I agreed with my girlfriend that something was just off about those kids, and that their behavior just didn't match that of a lost child. Maybe they lived on a nearly secluded property with their parents or something and were just playing in the woods or trying to steal our shit. I don't know. I had also heard of feral children, which could explain the dirty faces and raggedy clothes, I guess. Later at the cottage, though, I googled similar paranormal sightings, and apparently melonheads, a band of feral children with enlarged heads, have been spotted in the forests of Michigan just a couple of hours away from where we had been. They could have also been black-eyed kids, and upon asking my girlfriend this, she said that she was sure that the boy staring at her didn't have black eyes, or she would have noticed. However, his mannerisms, as she described them, seem very similar to stories I've read about black-eyed children, so I guess it's possible. If anyone has any insight into this or similar experiences, I'd love to hear them. The experience creeps me out to this day, and we actually ended up taking a different route on the way back just to avoid driving through that forest again. When I was in high school and my younger sister was in middle school, we would watch the school bus at different times because high school started an hour earlier than middle school. She woke up to her alarm and didn't know if there was a 2-hour delay due to it being winter and snowy outside. She came into my room, which at 7 a.m. is still pitch dark due to sun not being fully up and because I have black curtains and whatnot. She said that she stood at my door and said my name multiple times to see if I was there. If there was not a 2-hour delay, I would be gone by this time. She then walked over to my bed and could tell that there was someone in it. She believed that it was me. She said that she poked me and said my name some more, trying to wake me up, but I wouldn't move or answer. She then said that she pushed me a little, and that's when she saw 2 eyes looking at her from the bed. She still thought that it was me and said my name again, but I wouldn't answer and only stared. She got freaked out and ran out of the room at this point. She then heard our father's cell phone make a noise and went to look at it, and I texted our dad telling him that I made it to school, and we always did because we had to walk a little ways to the bus stop. She was then scared half to death because she then knew that was not me in my bed. When we both arrived at home from school that day, she told me what happened while crying because she was just so scared. This has never happened again, but we have no idea why it happened or what it could have been. We've heard voices in our house before, and our grandma has always been closer to the spiritual side of things, but we've never been involved in all that, so we have no idea what's going on. It was a few days before New Year's Eve in 2016. I was 13 and had invited a friend over to stay for a few days. That night, at about 10 p.m, we decided that we wanted to go out and take some photos. We had some fairy lights and stuff, and the first pictures that we took outside actually looked pretty good too. Then we decided that the streets of the area that I lived, and still live, they were just too bright, and we needed to find someplace darker for the fairy lights to really look good, you know. We finally decided to venture into the fields, which are located behind my residential area, and these fields are pretty dark, and there are only very few streetlights and no paved roads and only trails there. In the fall, it gets pretty foggy too in the early morning hours, and people sometimes tell some pretty scary stories about these fields. These stories were nothing that I believed in, though, and neither did my friend, so we were not scared when we went out into the field. Also, I should mention that we were not on any drugs or medicine, and we didn't consume any alcohol whatsoever. Again, we were only 13. None of us suffer from any mental or physical illness too, which could cause hallucinations. So we went out on the closest trail, which was pretty close to the houses of my district, but far enough so that it was pretty dark too. We walked a bit, but I mostly kept my eyes fixed on the trail so that I didn't stumble over any rocks or sticks lying around. After a short walk, we were approaching a bench with a streetlight right next to it. I first didn't look up, but I knew it was coming because I knew the area like the back of my hand. However, I soon wanted to know how close that we were, so I looked up, and that's when I saw this really strange creature. It was all black with really long arms and legs, and it didn't have a face. However, its head was slightly tilted so the light could shine on the empty space where a face should have been. The memory is slightly fuzzy, but I think it also had really big hands. Comparing it to the streetlight, I would estimate its height to about 3 meters. Pretty sure that's about 10 feet. To be very honest though, and at the risk of not being taken seriously, it kind of reminded me of Slender Man, minus his suit obviously. I only saw it for a split second, and when I blinked it was gone. Logically, I thought it was just my brain playing tricks on me because I was a little tired or something. I decided to turn to my friend and tell her something along the lines of, "Dude, I just saw some sort of weird Slender Man looking thing over there," and hoping for a good laugh, and she just didn't respond with laughter, and instead she stopped, grabbed my wrist and whispered, "I saw it too." We talked about it again the next morning and came to the conclusion that we did in fact see the exact same thing in the exact same moment. To this day, we have no idea what it was or where it came from, and we've also never encountered it again. But if anyone has any idea of what this could have been, or has maybe even seen something similar, please do tell me, because I just want to know what I saw that night.